Mahier Tayob will oversee the business rescue process of PioTrans, which is Rea Vaya's operator. The practitioner believes the process should have taken place a while back. It follows allegations of maladministration against the company. Tayob joins us now for more on this process. Mahier, good evening, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening to you, sir, and good evening to your viewers as well.
Let's start right there. You were saying that this is a process that should have started a long time back. Why is that?
So the Companies Act dictates that. I mean, in terms of the Companies Act, you should have known about the liquidity deficiency at first knowledge, not at convenient knowledge. So when the company was unable to pay its debt in the ensuing 6 months, the directors or the board of directors were obliged to file for business rescue. In the absence thereof, they were also obliged to file a Section 1297 notice informing all of the creditors of the liquidity deficiency and their reasons for not filing for business rescue. Now, this is peremptory, and it's in law, and they should have complied with that.
With that said, what is the process at the moment? I mean, looking at exactly what you have found, and it does sound like there's a lot of, beyond maladministration, a lot of issues that you have to deal with to try and get Rea Vaya back on the road, as it were.
All right. So it's a process of many moving parts. But paramount to us, for the business rescue team, for the city, for the MMC of transport, is to make sure that services remain uninterrupted. So for us to do that, we have to concentrate predominantly on the operation side of it. But the operation side alone is not a standalone. Sorry, the operations is not a standalone. It works hand in hand with administration. So far as administration is concerned, we will strengthen the internal control systems. We will investigate what brought us here, who was responsible for it, and to what extent. And then take all the necessary steps to sue, to register criminal charges, and to remedy all of the breaches that have taken place previously. But it must be done simultaneously while securing the employees, while making sure that the services remain uninterrupted, and cutting costs, increasing revenue, and making sure that the essential services continue. So it's a parallel process, many moving parts, and we will ultimately consolidate all of that to form a proper business model.
One of the key things that you've just mentioned now, Mahier, is exactly that the biggest challenge would be to make sure that those who use the Rea Vaya are not affected. Is there a guarantee that the service itself will not be affected while you undergo this business rescue process?
So there is no guarantee, because they could be sabotaged. There could be a number of reasons. The unions could embark on a strike. Although we're communicating and we're interacting with all of the parties, we believe that we have made great strides in the process, and we're hopeful that it will continue uninterrupted. The city, the MMC have given us all the necessary support. You've heard probably the MMC's interview. He's committed. The city has issued a broadcast. They committed to it. And I think with proper communication, we could secure uninterrupted movement for our commuters.
You said one of the your first points of call as a business rescue practitioner was to dissolve the board. Tell us about why that was necessary.
Well, it is the very board that brought us into this liquidity deficiency, but it goes a bit further than that. So you've got a board of directors that are registered at the CIPC, and then you have a court order replacing those board of directors. So at the moment, you've got de facto board of directors and you've got de jure board of directors. Even that simple task has not been registered at the CIPC. And it's a dysfunctioning board, and the best thing to do is to dissolve the board so that I can take full control and get the necessary people to assist me in the process. Having a board that brought us in is equivalent to having the mouse guard the cheese.
I mean, one of the things that started this process, or at least that started showing that there were cracks forming, was when we saw some of the creditors attempting to seize part of the fleet due to outstanding debt. Would you say that is at the heart of that beyond the finances, maladministration also was a big issue that led to Rea Vaya being run badly, to be blunt.
Correct. For an execution, a warrant of execution to take place, that means there had to have been a summons. There had to have been a case that has either been won or a default judgment. And for the company to allow that, it means it's reached the end of it. And the court order was granted Friday last week, and the sheriff was there to come and attach. We actually saved this company by a hairline in terms of time. I had to write to the sheriff and inform him not to attach any of the assets because of the safeguards within business rescue. So if business rescue was not initiated and floated by Friday last week, we would be having a very different conversation today.
It must be a tough one, especially looking at the fact that you're working with a company that many people depend on a daily basis. What would you say then would be your next step? Is it, as you said, the board, dissolving the board was the first step of a plan of action, as it were. But what would be your key next step in this move to make sure that you turn around Rea Vaya?
Sure. So with business rescue, with the business rescue regime, you have safeguards, you have a moratorium, and what I will seek from creditors is a payment holiday. So before I even start paying creditors off, I will interrogate the claims. I will look whether those claims are authenticated, and once those claims have been authenticated, I will have a clear understanding of what the total liability is. I will then approach the creditors and ask for a payment holiday, utilizing those profits to replenish the business itself in terms of its spares, stock, repair the buses, and get it back on track. The more buses on the road, the more profits we will derive. And it is through those profits I will pay the creditors. But because the board is dissolved, I will basically trim down the expenses. And I think because the hemorrhaging would have stopped, we would be in a profitable situation. And I do believe that this company is a candidate now for business rescue. And I do believe it could be rehabilitated.
In terms of the investigation, because naturally you will have to do investigations to find out what actually brought PioTrans to this scenario. What's your expectation, or have you started, and what are you finding in those investigations?
Yes, so the investigation is commanded in terms of Section 141 of the Companies Act. And I've got to investigate the issues that brought us to this point, and if necessary, hand over my findings to the necessary authorities for prosecution. So whilst assimilating documentation, I've already unearthed, for example, the entity engaged with an internal audit firm to do a risk assessment, and then enter into a further SLA agreement with them for $351,000 a month, then breach that very contract only to be sued for $5.2 million. Now that is a bizarre scenario. And then I had the opportunity of looking at some of the financial statements where the red flags were already identified. But I am not certain that the financial statements are a faithful representation of the company's affairs. So the first task that I will do is to instruct independent auditors to restate the financial statements, and if there are reportable irregularities, to report on those reportable irregularities so that a proper foundation is laid. And that's from the administrative part of it. And like I say, the claims that would come in, and after interrogation, I'd look at those claims against the financial statements. But not only that, we will go into the operations part as well to find out if the company was paying for services, it received the necessary, the proper invoices and the proper services rendered per invoice. So it's going to be a long, drawn-out process. And through all of those, we will then unearth if there was further fraud that we uncover. But for the immediate, we know that there's been violations of the Companies Act, there's been violations of the Tax Administration Act. I know of fraud, and the MMC himself has iterated extensively on this in all of his interviews.
Mahier, I doubt you have a crystal ball, but how long do you envisage this process to take?
It's going to be a long process. It's really going to be a long process. I cannot tell you with immediate, absolute certainty. It's going to be a long process.
Okay.
And given given that there's a public interest on this matter, I take it that I will be on your show quite often and I will give you feedback in real time.
Mahier, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you so much for coming through to speak to us. That is business rescue practitioner Mahier Tayob.